Woo!
Hello and welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for students. I'm Alexis Carson, a junior studying journalism, and our guest today is Cheryl Lucanegro, a 2021 CJC Hall of Famer who graduated with her bachelor's degree in journalism. She's gone on to have a very successful career as Senior Vice President of Advertising Sales at Pandora and now serves as an advisor at SoundHound. Cheryl, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I've always known that I wanted to study journalism and work in the media field. Is that the same for you? What was the earliest moment you realized that this was an industry that you had an interest in?
I grew up in a family that watched, almost devoured news and sort of events, and we discussed it. There was dialogue constantly going on in our family about news. So I wanted to be a reporter. Sort of the idea was to be an investigative reporter. So when I went to college, I wanted to be in journalism, and I was very excited about the opportunity to go to the CJC for journalism.
What was it about journalism that excited you the most? Was that your dream job when you were in my shoes, a student at UF, to be an investigative reporter?
Originally it was, because to me, journalism was finding the truth and then finding the audience to educate them and inspire them about that truth. What happened though is when I got to college, I started getting excited about content development. And I had a magazine course, which really sort of thrilled me. It got me, I was fascinated by the whole process of putting a magazine together, then doing a business plan to find the audience, develop every single part of the magazine. Then I got very excited about the content development and sort of how then do you find ways to pay or find the revenue to actually make this project successful. So I sort of started thinking change in career, that this might be more fun, more interesting, and more compelling for me.
I have a love for magazines. I'm the president of the Florida Magazine Student Association. So I'm curious, what was your time like at Upside magazine?
It was very fun because Upside was a small publication. It was the first time I got to do sort of much more hands-on every part of it. Prior to that, I had sort of moved into selling advertising for print magazines. When I got to Upside, it was about the emerging technology industry and the people and the companies that were sort of driving that growth. And when I got there, it was a small publication. So I had to build the ad team. I had to develop the story that was going to be compelling for the advertisers to purchase ad space in. And because I was at the small publication, I also was placing ads, doing sort of the layout with the editors. It was a lot of fun. It was also very risky because we were small and it was a new type of magazine that we had to go out and really find advertisers that were willing to take a risk. But it was an excitement for me that drove me as I went forward to more entrepreneurial companies.
Oh, wow. So you kind of got to oversee multiple different areas of how a magazine operates.
Yes, and that is probably, and you can have that when you go to a small company because it's much more hands-on, and it's sort of then was very passionate for me because I liked the content. I was excited about, I had just moved to California, which was very oriented toward these new emerging technology companies. So I get to deal with the companies, but then also come back to the office and work with the editors on how do we find ways to present. I mean, the editors were in their own area, but we had to find ways to place ads, build stories around what the content was. It was a lot of fun. It was very interesting.
I'm sure that sounds like a dream. Now, I love to hold an actual print magazine, but magazines nowadays have switched to a digital format. What do you think about the growth and change in the magazine industry?
Well, I mean, I think what you want to do is you want to get, if you believe in your content, you want to find ways to get that to the reader, the user, the listener, whatever it might be, in whatever type of environment they're going to consume your editorial or your content. So for me, it was exciting that not only did you have a print magazine, but there was also the opportunity on digital platforms to expand the audience, reach more people, and have a bigger impact. So I was excited about digital.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of shift with what the times are. And then you went on to become the founding vice president of sales and marketing of Industry Standard Magazine, which grew rapidly in a short period of time. That must have been such an adventure.
It was definitely an adventure. IDG, which was a huge technology publishing company, was launching a new magazine, or a new newspaper is what they were calling it, because it was a weekly. And they were looking for a new way to talk about what was emerging, which was digital, which was the internet economy. So we were a business magazine about the internet. And it was I got there, I was employee number 3. And within 3 years, we grew to about 3,000 employees. We opened an office in London. We did conferences in Barcelona, because the internet economy became a global phenomenon, not just in the US. So we were covering it on a worldwide basis, but got to be there from conception. And it was very fun. We built, in addition to working directly with the editors on how we were going to actually present the publication, we also then had to build the ad staff in multiple cities, from New York, Atlanta. The clients are not just in one area. We were based in San Francisco, but at the same time, we had major office in New York. So I had a staff there, had a staff in Detroit because you have the auto market. We had staff in Chicago because you have all the consumer products. We had offices in Dallas. We had offices in LA. LA is a used market as well for consumer products. So it was you had to go where the advertisers were. And at the same time, we also, to cover the stories more effectively, we put editors in those places as well.
So students often struggle with picking their degree focus, and yet you work in a slightly different area than your major. With a degree in journalism, how did you end up working more in the advertising field?
It's, as I mentioned to you in the beginning when I was talking about building a magazine, what I recognized was that I was very excited about the whole process of content development. So there's more to journalism than just the news reporting as well as the news writing. And what I learned was that my excitement and my fascination was really with the whole process. And when you put the process together, you do have to find revenue to pay for building the process. So I got very excited about putting the story together that dealt with the audience and help brands and consumers get together. For example, find advertisers that would want to be part of this content and want to reach their ideal audience by advertising within the pages or the digital platforms, wherever it might be where this content was. That to me was a very compelling opportunity. And so I sort of slowly moved over from thinking I wanted to be a reporter to wanting to be a publisher.
That's really cool that you bring up how content creation is so huge now, and it seems like you were kind of on the bleeding edge before this took off.
Well, one of the things about excites me and what fascinates me was I got really involved in entrepreneurial companies that were doing things differently. They were finding ways to tell stories differently. So for me, I always look for a company that was going to change the world or talk about the changes in the world, And I was very excited about that. So I was attracted to those types of property, that type of content. And I guess that puts me on the bleeding edge.
Yes, to be a part of a company that you're truly passionate about.
I always had to believe in the content. I had to believe that they were doing the right thing for me to be able to build a story and sell it.
Many students hope to simply work for existing media companies. What was your experience like as a founding publisher of Edutopia?
It was very exciting. The idea, George Lucas has an educational foundation that is about transforming education by using innovation and technology. And he tries to, in his definition, is looking for creating lifelong learners. And when I was approached with the idea of being the publisher there, it was an idea that I believed in, and I felt very excited about it. I got to work with an editor that I knew from previous working at the industry standard, and we were able to build on that idea and create it was an every other month, 6 times a year issue magazine about transforming education. And it was written for educators. So for me, it wasn't for consumers as much as it was for the actual educators. And it was a very, very exciting because we were part of, first of all, George Lucas's foundation. But beyond that, we had to build a team from scratch. We had to create a look and a feel, and then we had to create the marketing that would help us sell the content to the advertising market. And it was the first year was very risky because it was a whole new concept to get to an educator audience. But it did very well. We actually won an award the first year for not only our media kit, which is part of the concepts and the mission of the magazine that you use to go into the marketplace. But we also won for the best new magazine from the Western Publishers Association. So it was a very exciting opportunity. On top of that, we also got to meet with George Lucas like every 6 weeks to tell him what we were doing and what things were happening, what we were having successes with, what we needed. And he was a good listener and had many, many ideas. So it was fun working with him.
So you met George Lucas.
Many times. He's a really good guy.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Are you a Star Wars fan yourself?
Of course. And isn't everybody?
They better be. One of the best series ever.
It was fun because we worked at Skywalker Ranch, which was his, where he had a film production company. They did sound. So we got to go to film screening. There was a lot of perks that went with this particular job. But it was a nonprofit, so it had a different mission than a lot of the publications I'd worked for in the past.
And Edutopia is such a unique name. Could you tell me the story behind that?
There was a lot of back and forth on what to call this, but we wanted it to be about the future and a utopia where everyone is educated in the right way and teachers are creating lifelong learners. So it was the combination of utopia with education. And so that's where the name came from.
Okay, so you worked there in 2005, which is around the time that Star Wars Episode 3 came out. So I have to ask, did you get to meet Hayden Christensen?
No, I did not, but I did meet Chewbacca. They had a big party where it was on the grounds of Skywalker Ranch, and we got to meet several of the characters, but the one I remember distinctly was Chewbacca.
And then you became Senior Vice President of Advertising Sales in 2005 to the company that would be later known as Pandora Radio. What was the original name, and how did you go about developing their advertising model?
Pandora was originally a product that was not for consumers, but it was sold to companies like Best Buy, where you could go in and find music. If you liked one song, you could find music you loved. And originally it was called Savage Beast Technologies, which is about, I guess music soothes the savage beast. But it was a very different concept. And there was a very small team there, and I was brought on early on because they decided to become what they call internet radio. They discovered internet radio. And the idea was people were on their computers and they wanted to find a way that they could listen to music without the typical ads running constantly for 20 minutes during a session of listening to music. So I was brought on because they had to find a way to pay for it, because every time a song plays, there's money that has to be paid out to the artists. And there had to be a way to pay for this. So advertising in a subtle way where you didn't interrupt the listener experience was the original concept of what I was brought in to do. And in coming in, it was just a web product. So when you turned on Pandora, I should send you some photos of what it originally looked like, but it was a very much of a web-based product. And we created an ad where we began to put digital ads on the page, but then for advertisers to know that people were still looking at it, because sometimes they go on to do other work while your music is playing. How did you guarantee that that advertiser would get that guaranteed view and get the opportunity to engage with the listener? We had to create an opportunity where they were looking at the screen and engaged. So we started changing advertising every time someone interacted. So for example, if you skipped a song, if you started a new station, if you thumbed up or thumbed down, a variety of things that happened, that's when the visual advertising would change. As the company grew, we had to find new ways to engage the user with the advertising that was actually paying for the content to be displayed. And we created something called branded radio, where branded radio was, we would work with an advertiser and create sort of a playlist or a group of songs that would sort of embody the brand as well as engage their ideal customer. And they would then add that to their station list. And while they were listening to that station, they would only see ads from that particular brand. Our first brand that risked it and decided to come along with this on this program of branded radio was Honda. And then Burger King came along, Dunkin' Donuts, and then it was like the company took off with advertising and more users came along. It was a very, very wonderful opportunity to really change the radio advertising industry as well as radio in general.
Since you worked in streaming music before many of us adopted to platforms like Pandora, is the streaming industry where you envisioned it would be today? Did it disrupt the music and radio industry as much as some thought maybe 10 to 15 years ago?
When things really turned around and happened for internet radio was when iPhone or Apple opened the App Store. And we were one of the first apps that you could adopt on your iPhone. And in the process of having that happen, all of a sudden, millions of people were downloading Pandora, listening on the go. And all of a sudden, you didn't have to just be in front of your computer to listen to music, but you could listen wherever you were. And it was that moment when that happened that our whole model changed completely, because then the majority of our users were on the go. They were on mobile. And then from there, we went into TVs, we went into cars. Pandora is even on some refrigerators, but anywhere there's a connected device, Pandora became an opportunity for you to listen to music, to choose to listen to music. So we actually had to change our entire model and find ways to create revenue streams from this new on-the-go behavior, because you weren't just on your computer anymore. You were listening across multiple areas. So, internet radio, it was a dramatic change for the whole industry. And I think it continues to be there because it's about every connected device there is.
What kinds of innovation made Pandora marketable? Were there any challenges?
There were lots of challenges. I mean, part of it is the way you pay for music. The minute a song starts playing, there is a money meter clicking that you have to pay an artist. And we had to find ways to monetize that. So that was one of the most difficult parts of the company, how to actually make sure that the musicians were being paid, because it's very different than buying a record. You're just listening to it for that time. So we had to find ways that the musician and the artist was paid. And there were processes that were already in place for that. But we had to definitely cover those costs. But we were also changing the whole advertising model on radio. And that was something really unique, because initially we were not using audio ads because we didn't want to disrupt the listener experience. We have added audio ads into the process, but they're quite different. They aren't as long and they aren't taking as much time. So it's a different process because we know you're on the go and you're listening. So we've changed that process. So we dramatically changed the radio industry completely.
And you're now an advisor for SoundHound, which you previously served as the Vice President of Advertising Strategy and Sales. Tell us about those roles within the company.
Well, if you're not familiar with SoundHound, it started as a music identity where if you listen to something, you wanted to know what it was, you asked SoundHound to basically figure out what that song was. But it is now a new and exciting AI technology. And it's really about being a voice assistant where they're connecting people with brands through conversational technology. So it's a very exciting place to be, because I think voice assistance, voice enabling is going to be the future of probably everything we do.
What about the roles within the company?
Initially, my role was to find ways to, once again, similar to what I did at Pandora, find ways because it was on a mobile device, to create opportunities for brands to connect with the consumers that were searching for music choices or finding out what music was and learning more about that song, that artist. So we were trying to find ways to connect those brands with our consumer audience. And so we were creating lots of different ways for advertisers to be present as someone was discovering the music they were looking for. And it was very exciting because it was a whole new way of discovery. And we were finding ways to place advertisers' messages in front of our consumers. As the company was changing and they were doing more of a consumer brand, they were changing their business model to go after brands where they could be a voice assistant within that brand. For example, within a Hyundai car, within a Mercedes car, where when you're talking in the car, you're asking it questions, they became that voice assistant in those cars. So they're on a different path right now, and a different advertising is not as important at this point because of the new products that they're developing as voice assistants.
What do you think the future of voice enabling the world looks like? How do you strategize for something so cutting edge?
I think one of the things that's happening right now is voice assistants are going to be ubiquitous in the world. And that means they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be improving customer service. They're going to be, if you think about a variety of things you do, and instead of sitting there and typing in a query, you're going to just ask whatever device or whatever connected device you're working with. So they're going to be everywhere. The strategy behind that is, how do you do that without disrupting, giving people the most accurate answer they can? So there's a whole technology behind accuracy, giving you just everything you need, so you become dependent on that. And that's a whole new future that we're going to. And there's a lot of companies that are involved in that, SoundHound being one. Of course, Amazon, Google, there's numerous companies. But right now too, there's a thing where you have to say, okay, Google, tell me this. Okay, Alexa. What SoundHound has done is allowed you to put your own brand there. So for example, when you're in a Hyundai car, you don't have to put in those what they call wake words, were words that wake up the system to actually answer your question. So instead of Siri, you're asking for the brand to give you the answer. And that to me is much more of a future, to have it be ubiquitous everywhere you can.
Since you've worked in this business for so many years, how do you feel seeing that this industry has changed so much over the years?
I'm glad to have been part of it because I kept learning. No matter what opportunity came along, there was something that was disrupting the previous part. And yes, it was changing and things were disappearing or changing. I got to be part of it and try to come up with ideas, concepts that would allow that part of the industry to grow in new ways. And then had to educate the people who were working with me how to do things differently. So it was actually very, very compelling, very powerful, very exciting to be part of the industry changing all the time.
So for students graduating soon, what do we need to know to be successful in the media industry?
I think the communication skills are probably the most important, whatever path you take. Writing skills. The University of Florida taught me a lot about writing. And I feel that that is probably the most important thing, because writing, because of texting and a variety of other things, has fallen, I think, is a priority for a lot of students. And writing is still so important. And to be able to speak to any audience, whether it's in writing or speaking, it is so important to be successful in a career. And to me, those are the most important skills that you should have as you take into the job world.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was so inspiring to hear that you followed what you were passionate about and then you became successful. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. Until next time, good night.